Today we're gonna take a little bit of a deeper dive into the wise son and the what's known in our Haggadah as the simple son, the Tam. But we'll see that was an edit. The original term for this son was the Tipesh, the, let's call it, foolish son, and try to figure out what is the role of the Chacham versus the Tam or Tipesh, and in what way are these permanent positions, like permanent commentaries on people's status, or in what way are they sort of somewhat conditional on your attitude towards learning? So again, the four sons as a midrash shows up in rabbinic literature in two places. One is in the Mechilta and one is in the Yerushalmi. In the Mechilta, the old midrashim on the verses in the book of Exodus, they list out the names of the four sons, and again you have here Echad Chacham, Echad Tipesh, Echad Rasha, Echad Sheino Yodea Lishol. So here not only is the Tam, the original name of the Tam is the Tipesh. I'm translating that as you're stupid, or stupid is a little bit too harsh, I think. So let's go with foolish. But you can see not only is it Tipesh, but also that the order is switched so that Chacham and Tipesh are next to each other, and in that way I think are meant to be contrasted. And as we'll see, if you look in rabbinic literature, Chacham and Tam never show up together, but Chacham and Tipesh do show up together as contrasting terms. And in that way, I think they are meant to be opposites, and we're going to figure out later on this week what Rasha and Eino Yodea Lishol are meant to do together. So again, to remind us, the Chacham, which we looked at yesterday, he asks the question from Deuteronomy, what are the laws and the statutes? And we said that this probably, the question is really, what is the meaning behind the laws and the statutes? That at least seems to be the implication from the quote in Deuteronomy from the answer. This is because God took us out. But here we see in this midrash, and like in our Haggadah, the answer to the question is sort of assuming that the wise son is asking a fact question, like what are the laws, as opposed to what's the reason behind the laws, and then you tell him the laws of Pesach, and you tell him, we were looking yesterday that spend time after dinner learning the laws of Pesach, not going around and carousing, or however else we translate afikomen even as dessert. Let's look at the Tipesh. Lemor mazot. This is just a straight up quote from Shmot chapter 13, saying, what is this? And you say to him, with a strong hand, God took us out of Egypt. And that's, again, just a straight quote from Shmot 13. So you have the Chacham and the Tipesh sort of contrasted here, as the Chacham is asking, what are the laws? And the Tipesh is asking, well, what is all this about? And then he gets sort of the main idea. And that might be sort of, okay, what can people handle? What are they interested in? What are they asking about? What exactly is foolish about that question? It's not totally clear. And in fact, as we see from the Yerushalmi, the questions and answers are the answers to the same questions are reversed. So it might even be that what the Chacham needs to hear is the story, and what the Tipesh needs to hear are the laws. That's the way it plays out in the Yerushalmi. Let's just look at it here. The Chacham says, again, the same question, Ma'idot, what are the laws and the statutes and the ordinances that God commanded us? We looked at the us versus them yesterday. And then you respond to him and say, God took us out with a mighty hand from Egypt, from the house of bondage. That's the answer that we give the Tipesh, the Tam, in our Haggadah, in the Mechilta. But now we see that is the answer that's given to the wise child in the Yerushalmi. So perhaps it's the wise child who needs to hear the big idea, and maybe he's asking the question, what are the reasons behind these laws? And maybe he's just asking the question, what are these laws? But you answer him with the reason. And so you sort of upend his focus on the details and go for the big story. Whereas Tipesh Ma'omer, what does the Tipesh say, the foolish one? Mazot. That's again the quote from the beginning of that verse in chapter 13 of Exodus. What is all this about? And then the Yerushalmi says, so you teach him Hilchot Pesach. You teach him the laws of Pesach. She'ein maftirin achar Pesach afikoman, that you don't finish Pesach celebration with the afikoman. And then they define it. Shelo yeh omed b'chavura zo b'nichnas l'chavura acheret. Don't stand up from this group and go off to another group, some sort of carousing or socializing that's implies some licentiousness. Don't do that. Instead, finish the ritual with the Pesach. So whereas in the Mechilta and in our Haggadah, the wise child gets the laws as the answer, and the simple child, the foolish child, gets the story as the answer. In the Yerushalmi, that's reversed. The wise child gets the story as the answer, and the simple child gets the laws as the answer, which just raises the question, what is the right answer for these children? And if you could really reverse them 100%, what's going on here? I think what I'm taking away from this actually is, in some ways, the wise child and the foolish child are closer to each other than you might think. And we're going to see that in some of these midrashim that I brought to you about what is the role of the Tipesh and the Chacham in rabbinic literature. If the answers could be subbed one for one, then perhaps the Chacham and the Tipesh are not on opposite ends of the poles, but actually able to be interchanged in a way that we might not expect. So let's just take a look at how these terms show up in rabbinic literature. This is one of the a number of midrashim that make it clear that Chacham and Tipesh are opposites of each other. Let's just see here, and the Rasha is going to make a guest appearance. Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa expounded, the angel who is assigned over pregnancy is called Laila, and meaning night. And he takes the drop and stands it before the Holy Blessed One and says before God, Master of the universe, this drop, what will become of it? And then you see the possibilities here. Gibor o chalash, a hero or a weakling. Chacham o tipesh, a wise or a foolish. Ashir o ani, rich or poor. So, judgments aside, you can see that Chacham and Tipesh are as opposite to each other as rich and poor. And that's what we're meant to sort of hear in the Chacham and the Tipesh in our four sons, the Chacham and the Tam, the simple child. But again, Tam is just sort of a later, I would say, whitewashing of the term Tipesh. And then the Midrash goes on and says, well, wait a minute, he doesn't ask God, Rasha Tzaddik. He doesn't say, is this drop going to be an evil or a righteous person? And why doesn't he say that? Because Hakol bidei shamayim chutz mirat, because everything is in the hands of heaven, except for the fear of heaven, which is to say that everybody always has the opportunity to choose whether they're going to be a Rasha or a Tzaddik. Whereas according to this Midrash, other things like whether you'll be poor or rich are more predetermined. So you see here that first of all, Rasha is something that you choose to be as opposed to you were predetermined to be. And also the opposite of Rasha is not Chacham. The opposite of Rasha is Tzaddik, a characteristic that we don't have in the list of the four sons. And in that way, sort of the Rasha stands out separately. And we'll explore that tomorrow. But what you can see here is that the Chacham and Tipesh are opposite of each other. Now, even if they're opposite, let's see the ways in which they are opposite. So one is in their attitude towards learning. Kolkach mishu tipesh. So in another midrash, we learn that what characterizes a foolish person, what characterizes a tipesh? Someone who says, "Eimatai ekra kol Torah." When am I supposed to have the time to read all of the Torah? And therefore, I'm giving up on the whole project. I'm never going to do all the learning that I could need to do. It's just too much for me. How could I enter into that project and that enterprise? But someone who is wise, and here they don't use the word chacham, they use the word pikeach, someone who is able to see clearly, let's say, see metaphorically. Mao said, what does he say? Shoneh perek echad b'chol yom vayom ad shemisayem et kol haTorah kula. So the opposite of the Tipesh approach is, Tipesh says, this is impossible, I can't do it. And someone who's the opposite says, I can do it. I just have to take it one day at a time. I'm going to learn one chapter every day. And that's the way I'm going to learn the whole Torah. And that's the meaning of the verse. Lo nifleiti mimcha. This is not too far, too wondrous from you, this Torah. You can do it. So here you have the possibility that that the Tipesh has an attitude of, who could possibly do this? Like mazot, as like throwing up your hands. What is this all about? I can't handle this all. It's too much. It's overwhelming. As opposed, and then the answer might be, let's take it step by step. Okay, let's learn, halacha by halacha, what this is all about. And you actually could sort of morph into someone who has more of a wise approach. Now, in terms of the interchangeability, that's this last midrash I wanted to show you here, which works off of 2 verses in the book of Proverbs that essentially say that rich and poor come together before God. And translated here, the poor man and the medium man, let's say someone who's not poor, also God gives light to them both. So this midrash is going to work on connecting and equalizing these 2 categories that seem to be far apart at first glance. Let's just take a look at how they do it. This is the one who is poor in knowledge of Torah, and the medium man applies to one who learns 1 or 2 orders of Mishnah. That is to say, not a super awesome person, but someone who's learned a little bit. If the poor man stood in the company of the medium man and said to him, teach me 1 chapter of Mishnah, and he taught it to him, then God gives light to the eyes of them both. That is to say, they end up equalizing. They end up not being forever categorized as separate. And they acquire this world and the world to come. The rich and the poor meet together. But if the same poor man says to the rich man, teach me a chapter of the Mishnah, and he does not teach it to him, right? The person who's above says, I'm not going to help you, but says, what do I want to sit down for and teach you the beginning of these very basic chapters of Mishnah from Brachot or Moed Katan? You should study the scriptures of the Mishnah with people of your own level, everybody to their own corners, right? Then the Lord is the maker of them all. He who made this man wise can make him foolish, and he who made this man foolish can make him wise. And there's our term, Misha salazeh chacham yachol lasoto tipesh, umisha salazeh tipesh yachol lasoto chacham. So this is a wise man acting in a foolish way, and God actually could flip the order here, and someone who is wise could become foolish. Someone who is foolish could become wise. So don't lord it over him by saying, "Well, I'm never going to take on this project and teach you a little bit," because actually you're this close to flipping positions. And so I think what I'm learning here today around these 2 terms, Hakham and Tipesh, is that on the one hand they're at the opposite ends of the spectrum, but on the other hand they are potentially interchangeable, even to the point where in 2 traditions we offer them 2 opposite answers. The answer one goes to the other, and just sort of reinforcing to us that these are not reified categories, but ones in which we could potentially switch.